afternoon is Gospel Life in the 21st Century. And the question at hand is Gospel life meaningful today? What does Christian life have to offer the 21st century? I'm going to switch gears here and move a little bit into science, because that's the world in which we live. There are several insights from science today that help us realize that we live in a physically interrelated universe. I think Francis would have just found this really wonderful, really good news. So there are 4 things I'm going to briefly run through. I mean, you don't run through this stuff, but I am going to. Morphogenetic fields, quantum entanglement, implicate order, and holons. Ready? All right. It's a journey. Morphogenetic fields. The British biologist Rupert Sheldrake began to look at biology not as discrete units, but as interrelated relationships, constituent relationships. And he realized that biological entities create fields of information. Not energy, but information. And these informational fields are carried throughout time and space without loss of intensity once they're created. And it could be that a species generates a field of a pattern of behavior that, in a sense, sets a seedbed for a similar species, but in a whole different place, that will tap into this field and reproduce the behavior. The term morphogenetic means form field. So that's what it means. You know, those of us who have studied Aristotle's philosophy know form and matter. But for Aristotle, form had a different notion than what Sheldrake is saying here. Form here is the information that shapes a way of being. Okay, so it's habitual patterns that link all people and which influence and is influenced by the habits of people. So the more people have this habit or pattern, whatever it is, the stronger the field. Just to give maybe just a quick example, you know, consumerism is a form field of some sort, you know. Western culture has developed a pattern of buying, consuming. And that pattern has now influenced, along with globalization, all parts of the world. And how do we know that? Wherever I go, there is a McDonald's. Consumerism and globalization. Now, here's what Sheldrake did. He took 3 short, similar Japanese rhymes. One was a meaningless jumble of words. The second was a newly composed verse. And the third, a traditional rhyme known by millions of Japanese. And he took these 3 pieces and he brought them to English school children. And he got them to memorize the verses. Now these children were completely tabula rasa. They had no idea what was a jumble of words, what was a new verse, and what was a traditional rhyme. And the most easily learned rhyme turned out to be the one well known to the Japanese. So what Sheldrake says is there was a seedbed, you know, that you might say a field of information that was tapped into. This could be one way, scholars speculate, how human consciousness is shared. We set up a form or pattern of relationship, and therefore it begins to influence other people, even though we are unrelated. The thing is, as more and more people learn or do something, it becomes easier for others to learn or do this. Okay, where am I going with this? Guess what? Yeah, you got it, right? If we practice involved goodness, you know, Franciscan evangelical life, it could set up what? A field. Whoops. Next, quantum entanglement. The quantum world is a very strange world. If you know anything about quantum physics. But here's something that was very strange that Einstein himself came across and said, this is too weird, it can't be. But indeed it was. Take two particles, A and B, and they cancel each other out. So A spin up, B spin down, or positive and negative, they spin to zero. Now you separate them. You put particle A on this chair here and particle B on the moon. And if you were to turn particle A here downwards, particle B would what? Spin upwards. And what scientists now speculate is that it's precisely the turning of particle here, A, downwards, that influences particle B upwards. We call this non-local action or unmediated action at a distance. A non-local interaction links up one location with another without crossing space, without decay, without delay. Wow, that is getting pretty scary, because if we say we are interrelated, here's a related phenomenon called teleportation. If you take two particles that mutually cancel each other out or form an entity, and here we'll take two people, Archie and Betty, who are deeply in love and about to get married. However, Archie goes to pray with Petra. Don't ask me why he didn't pray with Betty. Okay. He goes to pray with Petra, particle C. And when they pray, Archie and Petra enter a meditative state, and the thought or image from Petra that she's been concentrating on vanishes and appears in the mind of Betty. Do you ever get a phone call from someone you haven't heard from in like ages? And you said, I was thinking about you. Teleportation. So, we have then at least two brief examples from science to say to us we are indeed physically related. The physicist David Bohm, looking at the quantum world, speculated that there is an undivided wholeness in flowing movement. Now this comes from speculation on the Big Bang. You know, the Big Bang that has given rise to our universe. Sometimes scientists are looking for the string, you know, or one interconnected force of all forces in the universe. So they call it string theory. What Bohm speculates is that from the beginning there's an implicate wholeness. There's an underlying order of movement. So he says rather than starting with parts or explaining the whole in terms of parts, there is rather an undivided wholeness, and we derive the parts from the whole. Interesting. We switch it around. We think we are parts, you know, and then whole, but it's whole and then parts. And don't get rid of parts. We should even get rid of that name, parts. So he calls this a holo movement, a way of looking at reality not merely in terms of external interactions, but in terms of internal relationships among things. As he says, each autonomous and stable structure is to be understood not as something independent, but rather as something that has been formed in the whole flowing movement and what will ultimately dissolve back into the movement. Now this is something to ponder. First of all, this is what science is telling us today. You see, the problem with Christian life as I see it is we're living somewhere between the 5th and 13th centuries. We think as medievalists when it comes to religion. We live in the Ptolemaic universe, you know, concentric circles, heavens above us. We're here at the center of the whole, you know, cosmos. This is the heart of one of the hearts of our problems. We are living in two worlds. And what science can help us today is reclaim the very thing we profess. God is in relationship to us, and Christ is the meaning of the whole.